So, Chief, let me ask you, because I learned something today. Today is your 4th anniversary as police chief here in Crescent City. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. 4 years ago, actually almost 5 years ago, I retired from the Los Angeles Police Department, but I wasn't ready to retire from the profession.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed in a number of spots up and down the state, and my wife and I looked around and different things, and then Crescent City called and said, hey, we'd like to offer you a position. So it took a bit, but my wife said, yeah, we can do this because grandkids are important.
Uh-huh. You have grandkids here?
Oh, no, they're not here. They're down there. So getting to them, it was the challenge. So she gave me the green light, and I was able to give the city manager at the time the confirmation that I would come. So in March, I think it was March 2nd of 2015, I was sworn in as your police chief.
That's great. I'm really happy that that's happened. So our plan here today is to have a pretty wide-ranging discussion with Chief Minsal about a lot of different things. But one of the things, Chief, that I really had hoped to do was to learn myself and have our listeners learn a little bit about who you are. So, you know, what's the life history of Chief Ivan Minsal?
Well, I wasn't always chief. I was just Ivan Minsal. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. My parents lived there. My father was a spray painter. So when airplanes were big and being built in Los Angeles with Lockheed and McDonnell Douglas and all this, he worked for a contractor, and they did all those things. And then when they switched over to computers, when computers came on in the mid-'60s and the cabinets were as big as his house, that's what he did. Went to school in L.A., went to college, met my wife in 1979. We got married, and I've been married ever since. So we're coming up on, 38 years?
Wow, congratulations on that.
So my career started in law enforcement with the Los Angeles Police Department, the LAPD. It was my hometown, my home department. And I worked there until February of 2015. I did 33 and a half years there, and I moved through the ranks and left as what to call a captain, area commanding officer. I had my own station, one of 21 stations.
Talk, if you will, about policing in your career in Los Angeles. I mean, it's a very different environment than this, but then I'm sure in many ways similar as well.
Actually, the only real difference is the frequency. There are more people, more space, more territory, more everything, but the rule book's the same. It's still the state of California. There are the local ordinances that are very similar in nature, but they change. Los Angeles was like 460 square miles to the 1.6 here in Crescent City. The population, was 3.5 million people, something like that, to roughly 5,000 change here in Crescent City. So the frequency changed, but people still get into arguments. People still, go to the dark side, and crime gets committed, and that's why the police are here. But also, more importantly, what the police do, we're a service organization. When you're lost, you look for somebody to have some knowledge of the area. The police are usually the first point of contact. You've lost something, like a child or your puppy or something. You call the police and you ask, where do I go? What do I do to find my loved one, or find my wallet or whatever we may do? The police are the first contact. We're the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week government. We don't go home. We don't lock our doors. We don't close down for the holidays. We don't do any of that. We're always available for the public to call and say, I have a question. I have a need. We're out there, so we respond and we deal with it. Sometimes we're only limited by resources, but we always give the best service we can. We try to do everything that we would like to get if we were in need in visiting another community. So not everybody gets what they want, but we try to get as close to it as we can.
We're joined on Public Process today by Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Minsal. You are tuned to KFUG Crescent City 101.1 on your radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. Chief, a couple of things that you said I would really like to delve into a little bit more. You said people go to the dark side. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is, they get angry when, and they hit people, they take people's property, they commit crime, and that's the dark side. And that's what I reference, the dark side. They have committed a crime. The police do not judge. That is not our role. We have rules that we follow, and then we present that case to the district attorney's office, and if they believe it fits their criteria, it goes to court, and that's where everybody goes before a judge, and that's where the judicial part of our government sets in, and then they decide right or wrong, guilt or innocence, and if there's guilt, whatever that discipline may be, whatever that penalty may be. That is entirely what the court's preview does. We're law enforcement, and our job's to enforce. So we do our best to try to prevent crime, whether it be a traffic violation or a burglary where someone's breaking into the home. But if we come across where we have to go out and arrest somebody, we have some rules and things that we need to do so we can get that case to the district attorney's office and then ultimately to the judicial part of our government.
Part of the reason why I kind of caught that phrase the way you said it, and let me ask you about this, because it almost seems like there's something in there that, let me say it this way. There are so many people who get into these sort of simplistic dichotomies, good or bad, right or wrong, that kind of thing. Excuse me. And when I heard you say people go to the dark side, there's almost something like that in there that says, well, they're not always on the dark side, that they're actually multifaceted human beings. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Nobody is born to that. And I'm a sci-fi guy. That's
Me too.
My private life. I'm a Star Wars. I love Star Trek. And so that's probably where I capture the phrase, the dark side.
Sure.
So I don't say that to say anybody was born evil. I don't believe people were born evil.
Right.
I think that's unfortunately something that does happen. And that's why I have a job. That's why we have law enforcement. We keep people to protect themselves from themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And people do things that are accidents. There's things that go on that are intentional, and that's what we sorted out. And we have a process. Law enforcement is only one piece of the process, and it goes to ultimately to the judicial side of our government, which are the judge, the courts, and then they decide those things. That's not my job to decide.
Right. And I guess the other thing I was thinking about is this is the wrong word to use to phrase it, but sort of the customer service aspect of it all, because I think sometimes, of course, it's like, well, they're police, they lock people up, that's what they do. But a lot of the interaction that you have with the public, as you were talking about, is not that. It's people coming seeking help, and you're the first line often of that help. Talk about how that works and the kind of mindset and mentality it takes to do that.
Well, it wasn't always that way, but we've evolved. It's called a term called community policing. We do nowadays, they call it, part of that is community outreach. Mm-hmm. So we engage the community. We engage the community with our service. We work for the community. We work for the people who live in Crescent City, and our job is to serve them. That doesn't mean we allow them to run wild and crazy, but they tell us, we want you to protect us, we want you to enforce the law, and that's our mandate. So what we do, whether it be our newest officer or the chief of police, like this morning, I like to go to Starbucks in the morning, and I'll sit there, have a cup of coffee, and I'll engage people in conversation. They'll come up and ask a question, whether they be from out of the area or local town folks. I'll go by, Dutch Brothers, the different coffee shops, and I'm a coffee drinker. And, engage people in conversation, whether they have a question they ask or something about the process, something about me, whatever, what we can do. That's what's important, is that conversation. I learn from everybody I come into contact with. I'm learning about you. You're learning about me. So police work is learning about our environment.
You were saying, excuse me, having one of those throat warnings today. So you were saying it wasn't always like this. Oh, look at this. Now, here's community-oriented policing, right? I'm having a throat challenge, and the chief of police hands me a lozenge on air.
It's the season. We all have to help each other.
And I appreciate that. I truly do. We are talking with Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Minsal. Chief, you were saying that it wasn't always like this, and I'd like to talk with you about the difference in policing from the time that you started, when you first came into law enforcement, and now.
Sure. I started back in 1980 and, hired in 1981 with the LAPD. It's a process. Not everybody can be a police officer or a law enforcement officer in the state of California. It's very strict. There's a lot of things you have to do. And any one of those things you don't do or blemish on your record could disqualify you.
Let me stop you for just a moment. And what are the qualities, skills, and abilities that it takes to be a good law enforcement officer?
Well, to be a good cop is aside from the integrity part, but to get hired. So it's a two-part answer. So to get to that part where they swear you in, you've got to have a background that's free of incidents, good moral standing, and all the things, a good work record, education, different things. And you don't have to walk in with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, a high school education, an AA, something. But you have to be able to understand how to fill out the application, right, and communicate. So you got to have a somewhat of a solid foundation. It's not a one that it's so high up that's unachievable. Heck, I'm a graduate from the LA City School City. It wasn't the greatest in its day. It's better now. I went to school and moved through. So heck, I tell everybody if I did it, everybody can do it. But it does require people to come in and have, and in today's environment, things like good credit and good reputations, relationships in the family, outside the family, work ethic, those there's a lot of different things to get to the point where they swear you in.
Right.
From there, law enforcement, it does so many things. Our friends over at the California Highway, those guys and gals are specialists with anything to do that's on the road, whether it be those big super duper trucks or a moped, anything in between. Those guys and gals are magnificent. They are the experts there. I'm a traffic background, but nothing compared to what they have. They have great skills. Everybody gets to go out and learn. In today's environment, a lot of internet stuff, a lot of cyber security issues, a lot of cyber theft, those kind of things, identity theft. That has just gone completely crazy. That affects all of us, and 3 to 5% of the people are identified and prosecuted because it's so hard and so difficult. So people with computer skills and the knack of doing that are in great demand. Mm-hmm. And you see a lot of that in the advertisements on how to prevent yourself from becoming an identity theft victim. Back where I signed up, computers were new. The number 2 pencil was called the microcomputer in those days. That was how it was. And we've evolved and we have changed with society and technology because we are part of that. So the things that we look at is what is society expectations of us, and we adapt to that because we work for them.
Well, let's talk about that if we can a little bit.
Sure.
The societal expectations when you were working your way through and up in the Los Angeles Police Department, and the societal expectations now. I have a theory, and the theory is that a lot of what is being asked of law enforcement now is not necessarily what most people who have an interest in a career in law enforcement would have signed up for, if that makes sense. I think you guys are asked to do a lot that is not necessarily law enforcement, if that makes sense.
That's true. We do a lot that isn't law enforcement, but that is still part of community service, community policing. We get asked, hey, how do I find the ice cream shop? That's right. That interaction part. Right. We'll get to address that front line. We see someone in medical need, and we're the first ones asked to go and respond and evaluate. We do a lot of things, and it's not just here in Crescent City or the LAP. It's everything in between. It's law enforcement in general. We're a service organization, and just about every community, law enforcement is the only 24/7. So that's that first point when you call that goes out. And then we bring in the resources that are appropriate, whether it be medical, an EMT, the fire department, or a combination of those resources. But we're usually that first responder. You know, bad guys and shootouts and all, that doesn't happen too often.
Right.
But we get called a lot of stuff to help give advice, mediate disputes, get people on the right road when they're lost. We give a lot of advice, so we keep ourselves very worldly in things because people will ask us, hey, I'm not sure about this. Yeah, we get stumped, and we'll look at it together. I tell you, that's the great thing about the internet and computer, because we can work on that. We can assist people. Motorists in our town and here in Crescent City, you know, they're, hey, we're new here, we're passing through, and we're looking for whatever it may be. I remember a guy had his RV broke down. He didn't know where to go for parts, so I gave him some options based on my experience and my knowledge of our city. I told him, well, this store, that store, these have different products and services, so he can make a choice. That's a service we provide. People want to ask, hey, where do I go for medical care? I tell them where our hospital is, and I tell them about the different clinics, and our officers all do the same. So that's all part of the community engagement, all part of that community service. So we do a lot of things. So the more we do, we learn something new every day. We have roll call discussion where we talk about new things coming through. We listen to what's going on in the news. We listen to what's going on in the world. We also the internet and all that, and we also have a lot of organizations that talk about emerging trends, crime trends we see. We've seen a lot of talk about homeless issues coming to our state, to our counties, to our cities. A lot of people, a lot of different ideas involved, a lot of things going on, and everybody's trying to find something that works for their particular community. We're no different. And as law enforcement, we're that frontline responders to help handle the problem. Many of the times when police are called is people have a disagreement. We don't always get called. Occasionally we do get called for, hey, you guys have been great. We like to have you guys over for dinner. Or,
I'm sure that doesn't happen that much.
Doesn't happen too often, but you'd be surprised the community support we get.
Right.
Like I said, I'm a cup of coffee person, and somebody will say, hey, I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee, and it's reciprocal. I'll buy them and our officers, we do, because we're all in the community together. It's not, we're the paid professionals, but policing is really a community effort, and everybody on board, everybody all hands on deck, and that's how we police, and we do well.
So 2 questions I have, and let me remind the listeners that we're speaking with Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Minsal. You are tuned to KFUG Crescent City 101.1 on your radio dial, worldwide on the web, kfugradio.org. I'm your host, Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. So, Chief, I've always heard that domestic disputes are the most dangerous for police officers. Is that true?
That's very true. Many officers get hurt, many die in domestic violence, domestic disputes. All of a sudden, we're called to save the day or mediate or calm it down or whatever, and sometimes we have to take action, and all of a sudden both parties turn on us.
Right.
Or it's so explosive. So there's a number of things. It's probably the biggest situation where officers get killed or seriously or get hurt in the line of duty.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that forever, and I've always thought that was probably true. So,
well, people are very agitated, angry, frustrated, resentful. There's a number of emotions going through, and they take it out on us sometimes.
Right. So the other thing that we were talking about it, and I wanted to get to it, was it seems, I think this is true, that police have in many ways become the de facto frontline crisis mental health counselors in many communities. And I'm wondering about your thoughts on that, because it just seems to me that as other services have decreased, that increasingly that very often falls on frontline officers and on police officials such as yourself.
Well, Yes and no. And
Okay.
yes, in that we get a lot of calls. We're that first responders, and someone's out there exhibiting some unusual behavior, whatever it may be. They just is described to us, and we'll respond. And we get trained in some basic stuff. We're not going to go out there and say we're psychiatrists or anything in the medical. There are experts out there who do that. But we have enough knowledge and training and insight to see that people do need it. So we have the ability by the state of California, where that section has been the 5150 Welfare Institution Code, WIC, and that allows us to detain people who we believe to fit the criteria. They're a danger to themselves, a danger to others, and they're unable to care for themselves. And we can bring them to a medical facility where they can get medically checked and seen by somebody who has a much greater experience, training, and insight in mental health. And then they will value it. They can be held up to 72 hours, and those professionals who will do that, and then they'll say, okay, yeah, this person is okay, or this person needs to stay longer, or needs some kind of a care. We're just that small part of it. We're the front end of it, and we bring people up. Now, the resources for those other agencies involved, whether they be county health, the hospitals themselves, with the 58 counties here in California, everybody has budgets, everybody has personnel needs and shortages and things, and we're no different. And we work with our other agencies. We take people up to the hospital, they're evaluated, they're treated, they're given what they need, and then cycle to a place where they can go on, whether it's extended care or patient setup type care, with visits and things. So not an easy thing, but it is a part that of that service that we do as that first responder.
I have a previous career where I worked for a county mental health department. I worked for the county of Nevada in California.
Yes, I know where that is.
Yeah, Grass Valley, Nevada City, that area. And so my experience then was the 5150 evaluation was a pretty high bar to meet. Mm-hmm. And so, and often due to budgetary constraints, very often people who are brought to be evaluated for 5150 are not taken and placed into care. They're basically put back out on the street. So my two questions to you are, how often, and I'm not expecting you to give me an exact number, but how often are you and your officers having to take people for these evaluations? And how often are you finding that these very same people are back out on the street with only getting minimal or no help? And that's not to say anybody's a bad person. I'm just asking you in having to deal with that situation.
We do have repeat contacts with people, and I think it's not that they're getting bad care. It's
right.
Not that they're getting. I think people do get well. People do have relapses, and I think that's the way, the better way to look at it. They go out, they get evaluated, they get treated, and some have to stay longer. Some get transferred to other institutions where they need more in-depth care. But some people just need someone to kind of sponsor them, mentor them, and the mental health profession, it has a variety of things. People who are mentors, they're the counselors. You have the psychiatrists, and all the things in between. And again, we're just that point. And I do believe people do get well. People get on the right track, and sometimes they fall off the track, or they have a relapse, and something happens, an episode, something triggers something different. We're called, and we may find that person and transfer them back where they can reestablish that contact or reconnect with those caregivers. So it's not that I think anybody's bad. I don't know, if those professionals could tell you if they had an infinite budget,
right,
they could do a
right.
number of things. But yeah, we're all constrained with budgets and personnel needs and those kind of things, but I think everybody in both professions do the best they can to help those people who are afflicted with something that they themselves have no control over.
Well, and that's one of the premises that I tend to operate by when I'm doing certain kinds of work, is that so many different sectors of our community, government, nonprofit, private sector, are really struggling. This is a challenging place to live in many respects, and there's a real lack of resources, I think, and so it really means that I think people need to be working together as much as possible in order to be able to provide the type of services that a community needs to be functioning and healthy and vibrant for everyone. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And and speaking here, both our county folks, whether it be the sheriff, the director of human services, we all work together. We all communicate. We meet on different committees. We all meet to how to improve our service model, how things are changing in our respective agencies, and for the betterment of the community. And that could be everything from changing of hours. We got a new grant, whatever that may be, and we all communicate and work together. So I think we will always be challenged because there will always be a need. But everybody who's in the public service component understands that and works towards the goal. The ultimate goal is to eliminate public service. That everybody is
right.
whole and everybody's. But that's the goal. But we'll never achieve that. But we work towards that. It's kind of like me saying I've eliminated all crime. Well, that's not going to happen.
Right.
But I can surely make some inroads in trying to reduce it, and working with our elected officials, working with my colleagues, both law enforcement and non-law enforcement, we can make a difference and we can help those. I tell you, the greatest thank you can get, whether you be anywhere in public service, is when someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, thanks, you made a difference, you changed my life around." I tell you, that's like the Medal of Valor kind of stuff, where someone just comes and says, "You made a difference." We sometimes think of it as, we're doing our job, or, we're glad to be, and we'll kind of say whatever and kind of minimize it,
right.
But really inside we're kind of saying, wow, that's great, my efforts made a difference. And I think that's what's important. Every individual is just that, an individual, and every need is different, and collectively here in Dale North County and Crescent City, we all work well together. We may not always agree, but we work well together to the common good of public service, and that's what our mission is.
We're speaking with Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Minsal. This is KFUG's Public Process. I'm Mike Thornton. Chief, so you talked a little bit about the sheriff. Talk a little bit about the working relationship with the sheriff's department, how that works.
Well, Crescent City, what's unusual in this county, and there's a few other counties where there's only one city and one county.
Right.
Sheriff Apperson and I, we're both friends professionally. We're also friends as friends, non-professionally, I guess that's the way to say it.
Sure.
We both have a love of family. We both have a love of motorcycles and nostalgia cars we like to restore, so we'll talk a little bit about all that. But we also talk about how we can best improve our agencies and improve any communication or working together. He has a specific mission as the sheriff. I have a specific mission as the chief. And many are similar. There are some differences.
And I'd like to know what those differences are.
Well, I have a city. I have 1.6 square miles, but I have a heavy concentration of the population. He has the other, I think this county has about 1,000 square miles. It's about 1,200, but I think 200 of it is water. So about of open land, open area. And he networks with the other law enforcement agencies, would be California Parks or the U.S. Parks Department. He works with the California Highway Patrol. So he networks with them. And I do the same, but he works with them a lot closer because they cover a lot of the same territory that his deputies carry. But all of us work together regardless of what kind of badge we have. The fact that we have a badge and we have a mission, we've seen that time and time again. But those differences are geography, concentration. His agency is a little bit bigger than mine. He's taken over some cases for us because he's had the expertise. We've assisted him in his agency in different things, whether it be at a car stop or a major scene. We have a great relationship, both professionally as agencies. We have a great relationship as individuals. Do we agree with everything? No. But that's being human, and that's being professionals.
Okay. So is it too pointed to ask, if you don't agree on everything, what is it that you don't agree on?
Oh, I think it's just really more of things that we can work on. The best way to maybe contact the public. What may work for him may not always work for me. He's a big Facebook guy. I'm not. And he does well at that. Right. And here I am in front of the radio with you, and I do a lot of public stuff. I go to a lot of meetings and community things. So we have our expertises. We have the things. Sheriff Apperson's a little younger than I am, so he feels real comfortable with that. I'm a little older, and that's not like you. That's not something we grew up with. This is what we grew up with.
That's true, absolutely.
So we maximize our strengths, and we learn to improve our weaknesses. So I learn things from him. He learns things from me. And the same thing with the commander over at the CHP, Larry Dupree. We all share. We have an organization called LEADN, which is the Law Enforcement Executives of Del Norte County. Okay. And we all work well there. We meet once or every couple of months, and we talk about crime trends. We talk about training, talk about what's up in the business. And we're also joined by, the district attorney's office. We're also joined by probation. We're also joined by the parks, both state and U.S. So everybody who's in the law enforcement component, we all get together, and we have lunch, we talk, we share stories, we talk about concerns, we talk about do we need to support this cause, do we not need to support this cause, how to address new things. It's a collaboration of friendship and professionals for the betterment of our community.
We're talking with Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Minsal. And Chief, so what role does tribal law enforcement play in this? Is that something more in the sheriff's realm, or do you interact with tribal law enforcement?
And I owe them an apology. They, the Yurok community, has a police department. I don't interact with them as much as the sheriff does. Right. There's about 20 miles, I think, between us.
Sure.
But they are in our community. We do communicate, email, phone calls. We do meet at the leading meetings. They are part of that law enforcement family. So we share things. One thing, crooks don't get the political lines. They'll steal on the reservation. I think that's correct. Out there in the territory, the Native Americans' territory, or homes, or in Crescent City, in the county. They don't understand all that stuff. They don't even care. But they just know they're out doing what they do. So we share information on wanted suspects, crime trends, where things are going or not going, those kind of things. And our community wants that. They want us to solve crime and get property back. They want us to bring lawbreakers to justice, and there's a process for it. Like I said, our job is to lawfully catch them and take those cases to the district attorney's office, so our district attorney and her staff can prosecute them, and so the judge can make the judgments that they need to do. It's a team effort. There's a lot of different components of it, and it's very easy to get thrown out, technicalities, but we want that. What's the most important about this is the process. We don't want to violate anybody's rights, but we're human. Mistakes are made. Cases aren't perfect, and things get, they will not prosecute for certain reasons. And those things, those are training moments. Those are new crimes that we think are crimes, but they're not crimes because there hasn't been legislation yet. So we got to reach out to our elected officials to do that. 20 years ago, nobody would have said anything about internet, or 30 years ago about an internet crime or identity theft. So the laws have to catch up with the crime, because as law enforcement, we report that back through our elected officials and say, hey, this is what we kind of think we need, and these are the things we're doing. And then you get that collaboration of people who weigh in on it, and that's how legislation gets passed.
Well, I know you have a long history working in L.A., which is multi-ethnic community, and I guess the question that came to my mind when we were talking just now was, are there any particular challenges or efforts that affect law enforcement regarding working with our Native American populations here? And I'm saying this because of, the long, history of genocide and discrimination that has taken place against those populations. Does that impact law enforcement here at all?
That's a tough question to answer, only because, when I first got here, they were some of the leaders in the Talawa Nation.
Taladini, yeah.
Taladini, they were a little standoffish of me, so we got to know each other, and I got invited to their celebration. I got to eat elk stew. Never had that in my life. And I found them to be the people, very honorable men and women, pleasure to speak with and learn from. I think it's just about communication. There are things in the past that we can't change,
right?
But we can learn from that, and we can move forward. I think the relationship that I have with my friends and neighbors in this community is a good one. Would we agree with everything on how things should get done or not done? Well, probably not. We're all human. We all have our perspective. But I think overall, we all work to the betterment of our community and to the things in here. So yeah, there are things in our past that don't go well, or we would try not to remember as anything good or bad. There are those really genocide type things that you spoke about. But that's all through the history of man.
Sure.
So we got to move forward, and I think talking and learning from those incidents, so they don't occur again, and making our relationship stronger and making our community stronger is the way to go.
Yeah, and certainly what's happened in the past has happened in the past. And I guess the reason I was asking is that when you have a people who have had a history of when the government came to their door, it was not going to be good, So, and I just was thinking whether or not that posed any particular challenges.
The police are the government. There are those who are suspicious of the police, but that's part of the community policing, is to let them know, those folks, that, and you're not going to win everybody's heart over, but to let them know that the police are, one, we're human. Two, we have a job to do, and part of that job is to serve them. We may not agree with anything they say or do, but that doesn't mean we treat them any different than anybody else.
Sure.
And it's important that if we can get that message through, that would be great.
Sure. No, I hear what you're saying. So let's talk, if we can, about homelessness in Crescent City and down north, because it's something that you've been dealing with a lot. It's something the community has been dealing with a lot. I understand there may be a city council meeting this evening where there.
Yes, there is.
So I'd like to talk about it. Homelessness has been an issue. You and I have both been involved in it. In our community, it's been going on for a long time. It's gotten a lot more public attention, particularly in the wake of the circuit court decision. So from your perspective, looking at the subject of homelessness here in our community, where do we stand? What's going to be happening tonight at the city council? And what are your thoughts about a way for the community to move forward in a positive manner to try and deal with what I think is a pretty complex situation?
Well, you said a mouthful there.
I'm good at that.
Well, the Crescent City Council is having one of their 2 monthly meetings, and on the agenda is a camping ordinance and a parking ordinance update, adding some stuff and updating some things. And if they approve it, and then there'll be a public outreach to educate people on the changes or the implementation of all this. But it would be premature. Our elected officials haven't weighed in on it and made a decision where they want to go with it. Those are 5 highly intelligent people up there who make decisions for our community. We've elected them, and this is their day to do what we've elected them to do.
Well, I'm assuming that you have had input into.
I've shared some things, but so have other members of the city family, from our city manager, Public Works, our city attorney, who's been the committee person on this, the chairperson. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, and then our bosses will weigh in and see if we've done what they've asked us to do. Homelessness has been around since the 1870s. I did a little research on that. It's really kind of took off, 1980 to 1991 in there. It really got out there. Is there an easy solution? Far from it. There's a lot of professionals will tell you there's a lot of different reasons why homelessness occurs. I think the one thing that's probably the most frustrating, because there are those who choose to live out in the wild or whatever, but there are a lot of who don't, whether they have mental illness, substance abuse, or a combination of those things, or economic or educational things. There's a lot of things that influence people's decisions to have to sleep in a tent, out on the beach or whatever. And I think what we need to do as a community is just to have some patience and a little understanding that the people who are doing the job to help those individuals in need are doing it. It's tough. Working within our resources, working as a team. We refer people on the police side to Health and Human Services. We refer them to some nonprofits. It's not uncommon for a deputy or an officer to reach in their pocket and throw out a couple of bucks or whatever it may be to buy somebody a cup of coffee, or maybe even something a little bit more. We're that frontline responder, and sometimes that's all it needs. It's important for people to know that people are working things, but it's also a private thing, So the people out there working, whether they be Health, Human Services, the police, the sheriff, everybody else, everybody is working hard to protect everybody's constitutional rights.
Well, and that's one of the things that I really wanted to get to, because I've said this privately to you and I've said it publicly, that I have just been incredibly impressed with your strong stance on constitutional policing as it pertains particularly to people who are homeless, the poor and the disenfranchised and the marginalized. And so I guess my question is something along this line, is at the same time that you're doing that and trying to fulfill your mandate according to the rules by which you operate as a law enforcement officer, I'm sure that you have had other people in the community pushing you to not do that because of their views of whether or not the law should apply equally to everyone, whether you have a nice house or a good job or money or don't. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
it was a clumsy way of getting to it.
Well, to answer it in just a few sentences, I took an oath. I took an oath twice. Back in 1981, the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics. I took it again when I was sworn in as the chief of police. And my job is to defend the Constitution, and that's defend people's rights, whether it be the U.S. Constitution or the state of California, and to enforce the ordinances of the city that employs me. That's Crescent City. And to be everybody's chief, to be everybody's police department. It's not all to the left or all to the right or the top or the bottom, or it's down the middle. I see something in the media that I may not like, but that's what I'm defending, is their right to say something that I don't like, and vice versa. People who speak, as long as you don't hurt people or infringe upon the rights of others, I'm happy. You can voice your opinion in the right setting and all that, and all that's great. It's when you go outside the boundaries of the law that law enforcement gets involved. And I don't care if you make $1 billion or you're homeless. If I believe you've committed a crime, I will go after you, because that's what I was sworn into. That's what I swore to do, and I will take you before the court if that's what I need to do, via our district attorney and do. But who you are or what you are or how much money you make or don't make is mildly impressive to me is in importance in the sense of law enforcement, because under the law, everybody's the same. That's why she wears that thing over her face. It's called blind justice. So none of those things are matter. What's the matter is you've been accused of a crime, and we need to take you to justice.
And I guess the thing for me is that I think a lot of law enforcement and a lot of particularly people in executive positions in law enforcement believe what you believe. My experience has been that most of them have not been as publicly vocal about it. Why do you do that so publicly?
I'm only speaking the truth. I'm only speaking what my job is. I'm only speaking of what the people of Crescent City hired me to do, is to be their chief of police. I give them the good as well as the bad, and I give them what law enforcement role is. We enforce the law. I mean, it's a big thing when you sit there and you read that little card we have that says you have the right to remain silent and all those kind of things. But it's also that says you don't have a right to trample on this person. You know, that's, you've committed a crime, both by the California Penal Code or U.S. or whatever it may be. You don't have a right to trample on other people. You have a right to speak your opinion, do your thing, as long as it doesn't hurt people or take other people's property or other things, because that's when we get involved. When people want to walk up and down the sidewalk and carry their sign, that's called a First Amendment right. You may not agree with what they're protesting or supporting or something, but that's their right to do. It's my job to ensure they get to do that.
Right. We're speaking with Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Minsal. This is KFUG's Public Process. I'm Mike Thornton. We just have a couple of minutes left, Chief. What is it that you would like the public to know about you, your job, what's happening here in Crescent City related to law enforcement? What's the most important thing you'd like to share with the public?
My biggest thing I would like to ask the public to do is engage. If you see something, say something. Call the police, call the sheriff, call whoever the responsible law enforcement agency is for your particular area, whether you be in downtown or out in Smith River or out in Klamath. Call. The thing that to help us help you is the sooner you call and let us know and give that best description of what is going on, so we can respond with the right resources and help you solve that problem. If it's getting your stuff back or getting you a place of safety, the sooner you call or have someone call or can get to us, that's the most important thing. Everything else will fall into place. But, you know, there's a generation or two that thinks sometimes posting things on Facebook is more important. I disagree with that a little bit. You can put that as number 2 or number 3, but call 911 first and give us a shot at trying to come out and help you and do what you expect us to do. Now, we may not meet every mark that you want, but we're going to work hard as we can to do that. So if you have a problem and you need 911, call 911, or if you have a general question, you can call the business number, and we'll be happy to respond with that, and we can go from there.
Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Minsal, thank you for being our very first guest on KFUG's Public Process. I'm just really thrilled that you were able to be with us today, and I hope you'll be willing to come back at some point in the future.
I thank you very much for the opportunity to come this morning and speak, and I hope I shared some things with our listeners. You can always get a hold of me. I'm kind of easy to find, and I see your second guest is coming in, an intricate part of my world, and again, we do have a great relationship, so I'll be listening to him speak here. So thank you very much for having me, and have a great day to all your listeners.
All righty. Thank you, Chief. And the Chief is referring to Robin Fornoff, Regional Editor for the Triplicate and Coastal Pilot, who is here in the studio. And we're going to be back talking about all things news and publishing and journalism in our modern world and in our community. Chief, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Have a good day.
We'll be back in a few minutes.